Hmm.
It is 6:30 if you want to give it another minute or two, or if you want to get started.
Yeah, let's give it another minute or two. People seem to be joining. We're not quite at our usual complement.
Yeah.
And if it weren't for this meeting, I would have still been sitting outside and enjoying the beautiful day. So, so the weather may not be working in our favor today. Hmm. Adam, I did just notice that the Philharmonic concert in Central Park is going to be on Wednesday, June 12th. Shall
Hmm.
we keep our next meeting on that date, or shall we switch to Tuesday, June 11th?
I have to check my calendar for the June 11th. I'm not showing anything on June 11th, but I need to double check before I commit to that.
All right, let's take a look, because I think Philharmonic concerts in Central Park are good traditions.
I would say I think everybody who's signed in is probably here.
Okay, then let's get started. Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for coming to our meeting of the Task Force for Residential Rezoning. Our Will, if I could share screen.
Ah, yes. I need to put the agenda down and you should be able to now.
Great. Um, okay. Does everybody now see? Very nice little simple PowerPoint page. let's see, how do we get to the next page? There we go. So we have two agenda items for this evening. The first is we are delighted to welcome Tricia Shimomura back to a Community Board 8 committee meeting. She is now the Commissioner for Manhattan Parks. And we asked her to come to talk to us about the idea as part of this discussion of rezoning manufacturing and commercial blocks on the Upper East Side, of designating the asphalt green block as parkland rather than remaining as we understand it, manufacturing zoned property. That's the first agenda item. And then the second agenda item is zoning proposals for East 60s blocks. And this is a little bit of a modification from what has been publicly posted. There are, for those of you who have been following along, there are 3 blocks in the East 60s that are under the study of this task force. And tonight we are only going to address 2 of them. As we looked at this agenda and everything involved, we felt that getting into the third would make for a very late, long meeting, and we didn't want to do that. So we will look at blocks 1474 and 1456, which represent 61st to 62nd Street on York Avenue, and the mid-block from 61st to 62nd between York and First, and the avenue facing piece of First Avenue there. Block 1435, which runs from 60th to 61st Street from First to not quite the avenue on Second Avenue. We will defer that to the next meeting. So that's our modified agenda for tonight. So just for those of you who may not have been at all of our meetings, this is our tracker and our context setter. So where are the commercial and manufacturing zoned blocks within the Community Board 8 district? There are 4 manufacturing zoned blocks, one of which has been already now been settled and rezoned for residential. That was the Friedland rezoning that was recently approved by City Council. Today we are talking about block 1587, which is on East 90th Street, east of York Avenue, and it is the current location of Asphalt Green. And then in our second half of the agenda, we'll be discussing the 2 highlighted yellow blocks and specific rezoning proposals for those blocks. Again, a reminder for those who are not as familiar, what is currently permitted in these areas. Basically, our baseline is that all of these areas permit community facilities up to a 6.5 FAR. And a variety of use groups that do not include new residential development. I mean, I think that is just our biggest point. Yes, there's a range of use groups, but in a city where we are desperate for new housing and in a neighborhood that is heavily residential, the notion that residential development is not allowed is the reason that we have this task force going. All right. So this is a beautiful picture of the asphalt green block. So you can see that it is currently fairly open space with the asphalt, the old asphalt plant where the facilities are located. Beautiful green with lots of trees, the AstroTurf field, and there are also other outdoor facilities here, but this gives you a sense of the current condition. And here is sort of what we know. And we will then sort of turn this over to our special guests. We know that this is city-owned property. We know that it is leased, or there's a license agreement that allows Asphalt Green to operate on this property, and that this license agreement is with the Parks Department. Hence our request to have Parks Department representatives here. We know that the current license agreement runs for about another 7 years. So at least in the near term, there is no expectation of any change at this site, but we are thinking very long-term here. And the hypothesis that we floated at our last meeting was that as part of this broader set of proposals to encourage more residential development, that we should also balance that with the goal to preserve open and recreational space in this particular block, rather than propose for this block to be converted to residential use. And you know, there gives and takes in this process. So we reached out to the Parks Department, and particularly, you know, with this notion that we think that this is not current parkland, and is that true or not? And so we asked them to look into that and to come and present their findings and talk about some potential implications of what it might mean if this space were to be designated as parkland, and is there a process for doing so? Before I turn this over to Tricia, I do want to acknowledge and welcome Elsa Pereira, who is the new Chief Operating Officer for Asphalt Green, who has joined us this evening. And want to thank her for being here. She is here mostly in a listening and learning mode herself. But we also wanted to, just after Tricia speaks, to give her an opportunity to introduce herself and Asphalt Green a little bit more to the committee. So with that, Tricia.
Hi, everybody. Okay, so I just get a couple things out of the way first of all. To start with the most personal, I think that I know very closely about maybe 75% of the folks that are on this call. You've seen me grow up. You've seen me become a wife, a mother, a community board member, somebody who is now your Manhattan Borough Commissioner. So to those of you who I've known for a long time, it's really nice to see you again. And to those of you who don't know me, I'm really happy to meet you here. And I hope that when you see me on the streets of the Upper East Side, because I'm there, that's where I live, then I hope that you say hello to me and to my family. And I will start probably every meeting like this for a while, but it's because of this board that I'm in this position. This is where I chaired the Parks Committee for a while with Barry Schneider, but before that was with Peggy Price and Barbara Rudder and that crew. It was really what sparked my interest in parks and open space. I know how vitally important it is. I spent the majority of my professional career fighting for our Esplanade and our waterfront and advocating for that space, which is just so important. And so you can't really get more personal than this board is, and me and what you all have done in terms of teaching me and being so influential in my career. So thank you. And it's really nice to be here. Then putting on my second hat, I will just say, before this, I was working as your Director of Community Affairs for the Manhattan Borough President's Office, where I was very, very much involved in community boards and all things related to various community activism throughout the borough. So I wanted to say this. I said this to Elizabeth Rose yesterday, but I'm going to say this again to you. This is not wearing my Parks hat, but this is just as like a friendly suggestion. I admire so much what this group is doing. I think it's so forward thinking. I think it's so admirable, and really just goes to show you the power of community boards and what can happen on a very local level. I have a suggestion that you speak to Eric Cuello, Cuello, and I did tell him that I was going to do this beforehand. But he's now the new Director of Community Affairs for Mark Levine, but he was also heavily involved in the Morningside Heights rezoning plan. You can Google that and see what comes up, but this has rung very like, it's just in talking to Elizabeth Rose about this and watching this myself and talking to Adam, it just kind of has a lot of the same kind of features of like a community-led plan to rezone a neighborhood with the hopes of building more housing. That's, you know, essentially those kind of building blocks is what CB9 has led, but it also involves CB7 because it kind of overlapped in that area. It is a years-long process. It's oh shoot, I forget now the quote, but it's work worth doing. And I forget who said that. Maybe it was a Roosevelt, but I can't remember. I just highly recommend that you take a look. You can see the plan online. You can just Google it, and Eric in the BP's office was kind of instrumental in doing that. But you should also you can talk to Barry Weinberg or Robert Stern from MHCC, and I forget the acronym for that, but there are like a lot of community groups involved. And I think that eventually, if you're going down this path and this is where you think you're leading, it's worth looking into. And I'm happy to make those connections. Okay, so I did the personal hat, I did the former VP hat, and now I'm going to wear my Parks hat. Okay, so as your Manhattan Borough Commissioner, I'm very happy to be here, but a couple just expectations setting from the very beginning. I can promise you that I'm not going to have all of the answers right now. I guarantee it. I can promise you that knowing that this is a long-term effort that you all are leading on, and knowing your chairs and how your co-chairs and how dedicated they are to this, I can promise you that I will be back with more information when I can. So from the beginning, I'm not going to have all your answers from the beginning. I promise to be back and continue the conversation. And then finally, I will just also set your expectations that I'm about 25 days into this job. So I'm still frankly learning where the bathrooms are in my building, but was really happy. And I spoke to Elizabeth Rose when I was less than 48 hours into this job. You have a very strong co-chair who's like kind of been keeping me up to date on this. And so have done some work with Colleen Alderson from our Parks team, who I'm very happy is here with me, to try to find just some basic information for you guys to start out. So with all of that, I will say, okay, you are correct. This location is not officially mapped as a park in our city map. It is not dedicated parkland, to use that phrase, although I get nervous because I'm still learning those phrases myself. However, asphalt green is included within the Department of Parks and Recreation portfolio. You obviously saw that, you've done your homework, you know that we have this ongoing relationship, legal relationship, agreement, lease, all these things with Asphalt Green. It's a long-standing agreement that Colleen would probably know better than I do, but it goes back many, many years, and we are still moving that on. There are many layers of protection here, though. I don't want you to think that tomorrow, obviously, a developer can propose something and put it on Asphalt Green's property. There are several kind of hoops. Even when I kind of brought this to Colleen, kind of in her unit, everybody was kind of like, wanted me to emphasize that it would be, it would be kind of extraordinary and highly unusual and like kind of mind-boggling to see something being proposed and going through and actually being built here. We understand the significance of this land. We understand how critical it is. You can't get, you've heard me say it from the very beginning, but even in its leadership, I sit here as the first female borough commissioner for Manhattan, to be fair, but like except by somebody who's a diehard Upper East Sider, and like essentially like it would there's just a lot of kind of protections both on the books and off the books that like everybody kind of understands that this is like a very sacred space, and a space that's heavily used and like very important to a neighborhood that doesn't have enough parkland and open space. But it is true that this is not mapped on our city maps as a park. I will point out, however, that there are many other parks that are like this as well. In fact, I think, Colleen, now nod your head if I'm correct on this, but Central Park is not mapped as parkland on our maps. There are other situations where this is also the case. So I certainly don't want anybody to come away from this being alarmed, thinking that this is like something that could happen tomorrow. But happy to kind of go into a little bit more detail. So that's where I'll stop right there. I will say that I'm going to also just lay my cards out from the very beginning in terms of any sort of specifics with asphalt green, just because I'm not an attorney and I like want to make sure that any kind of specifics around asphalt green, like I will like rightfully say that like anything kind of getting detailed there, I'm going to not really have any good answers for, because that's a legal relationship. We're already in the lease. I would like have no business kind of like opining on anything there. Other to say that like I think we're really happy with our relationship with Asphalt Green. I think that we still have many years to go in terms of our contract, but I forget how many years this relationship has existed, and with that comes other protections as well for the use of this space. I hope that that's a good place to turn it over. Colleen, I'll just look to you to tell me if I missed anything, or if there's anything that you'd like to add, or if I was egregiously wrong in anything. I also accept that that's a possibility, but I'll just look to you really quick to see if you would like to add anything.
Sure. Just one quick note. I was just looking at our agreement with Asphalt Green. It is a license, just to clarify that it's not a lease. And I did see that the expiration is in 2031. So that's what I saw in our records. And just to introduce myself, I'm part of the Parks Department, part of the Environment and Planning Division, and I'm the Chief of Parklands and Real Estate. So all of the park records for all of our individual park properties is something that we contain in our office. So I just wanted to introduce myself and just clarify that point, but I think you captured everything, Commissioner.
That's great and really helpful. I think let's see if we have questions for you all. I have one that I don't necessarily expect that you will have an answer to here, but I think this is maybe sort of conceptually something that would be helpful for us as we go forward. Obviously, whether it's, I have actually a couple. One is, what does it mean for something to be designated as parkland, as opposed to operated as a park?
Mm-hmm.
So if I don't know, it sounds like you're saying Central Park is not mapped on our zoning maps as a parkland, but I don't know whether that means it's also not designated parkland. And I know I have run into this question of, is something designated as parkland or not in other context of real estate development and residential development, so I think that's a question that we would all love to understand at some point in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other is, obviously our parks work with lots of nonprofit partners who provide educational and cultural programming and occupy space in our parks. And are kind of permanent fixtures in our parks. If you think of the Wildlife Conservation Fund for operating zoos, or you think of the Botanic Gardens, I mean, these are clearly long-term relationships with a third-party managed provider. And sort of, how does that come about and happen? Which, I think some of us, if not all of us, would think that would be a great thing to happen with Asphalt Green, in particular Asphalt Green, the organization. And how is that different from, we've all seen the operator of the coffee kiosk at the children's boat pond turnover. We've seen the restaurant operator at the boathouse and on the lake turnover. What enables these great long-term educational programmatic fixtures in parks, and how is that different from these less permanent operating agreements, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Let me go to Colleen and ask if Colleen wants to give any sort of feedback on that thus far, and then let me see if I can where we land after that. Go ahead, Colleen.
Yeah, so dedicated parkland that has significance in terms of you would need approval from the state legislature if you were proposing a non-park use versus parkland that is not dedicated parkland. So that's a difference. And there's all kinds of nuances in terms of what is dedicated parkland, I shall say. I don't want to put alarm bells for Central Park out there, but it was created as per chapter law. So even though it's not mapped on the city map, the virtue of it being called for in the chapter laws of the state of New York puts it in that camp. So if anyone to propose anything, it would rise to that level. So I just wanted to clarify that. And so I don't know if that answers your question completely, but it's a legal term, and I'm not a lawyer. Our borough commissioner is not a lawyer, but I know, I have dealt with projects that do trigger alienation, even for our own city projects for different situations in the city. So I have some familiarity with that when that is required. And then on the question of partner groups, so I just looking at our records, we've had a partnership with Asphalt Green, I think since 1989, and in 2011 was the newest license. So, it's been for a long time, and as far as I know, it's a great, partnership, and I'm sure we hope that it continues. I will just clarify that for a lease, that is a much different thing. And a lease for city property does require ULURP approval. So it is a land use action that does require ULURP. So if that is something that, the community board is thinking about, what have you, it would, as far as I know, require that. So I just wanted to make that point.
And so a lease would require a ULURP, but a license agreement does not.
Correct.
Okay. That's helpful. I could keep going, but let's turn to other attendees. We'll go first to members of the public. Diego Barberina.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can.
Okay. Well, this reminds me for Marx Brothers Park, when the Second Avenue subway was constructed, the playground of the Marx Brothers was demolished and it was used as a construction site. And we were told not to worry. The playground, once they finish the subway, the playground is going to be beautiful and everything. And when the subway construction was finishing, there was no plan for the playground. So I asked questions what was happening to the playground, and nobody gave me answers. Like, no one gave me answers. And all of a sudden, there's a ULURP saying that they were going to build this 60-story plus building. I was part of a group that we said that cannot happen because this is a playground. A playground is a park. In that case, it was protected. They said, no, this is a playground and it's part of the school, so it's not a park. We sued, and they told us that that actually didn't matter because at the time of the suit was going on, the city went and removed the park protection. And Garodnik, which used to be city council here, voted in favor of that, and as with many other people. And that was supposed to be signed by Cuomo, but then Cuomo had all these issues and he resigned. So we don't even know if that's still a playground or not. But if you go to 96th Street and 2nd Avenue, you see in the corner, there's gravel and there's no playground. The subway construction ended, 7 years ago? And we still have nothing. So these that we have to trust the government and they're not gonna do anything. I mean, there may be a building there soon. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who wish to ask a question or make a comment at this stage? There'll be lots of opportunities later in the meeting. Okay, let's go to members of the board. Michelle?
Thank you, Elizabeth, and great to see you, Tricia. I just wondered why not? Why isn't Central Park designated parkland? Why isn't asphalt green? Was that a positive decision made somewhere along the line? Is it just that nobody took the initiative of filing whatever necessary paperwork? What's the history there, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I think, I think that, so I, like, Central Park's probably not the only and best example that I can give you. I think that there are others along the way, because I think that the circumstances around Central Park are different. I mentioned it only because it was the most surprising to me when I heard it myself. But I think, Colleen, again, I'm gonna ask you to come in and clean up whatever I'm misrepresenting here. But I think that, like, for Central Park, it was a question of when Central Park was, like, I think it predated the mapping piece to this. So, and there was just never an effort to change that, like, or to correct that, or to update that afterwards to some extent. I'm being too blunt and short with this, but I essentially think that it was a timing thing. For asphalt green, we were talking about this. It's really hard to say. I don't really no, I don't think we were talking about this earlier this week. I don't believe that I don't want to postulate. Essentially it's I can confirm at this point that it's not, but one can imagine that there could be a number of different reasons. I don't know if Colleen, if you want to say anything more about that, or if you have any more history that we actually know for sure, but frankly, I don't know.
Okay, well, I'm
Oh.
asking because, so there's, my understanding is 7 years left on the lease.
Not lease, license. I
On the
misspoke. License, not lease.
Okay, and we don't really, or at least I don't really understand, what safeguards are in that, or what differences those are, and how protective that license is or isn't. And so the question is, in light of what this committee is examining, although we were focusing on housing, but if there's reason to believe that, I won't go into Central Park now, that's a bigger issue, but if there's reason to believe that asphalt green needs absolute protection or protection in the future, do you recommend that we include that effort in what this committee is trying to do? And is it my understanding that it would be an effort mainly conducted through the state? Is that what I heard? I don't know if I heard that correctly. But at any rate, what would be, with the information you currently have, which I realize we're going to have more information going forward, do you recommend that we include that in our effort? Because along with residential and housing, we did want to maintain open space in this community, which has the least open space probably in the whole city. So, and how practical an effort will that be? And can that effort, if we choose to do it, be instituted while the license is being held by Asphalt Green, with the assumption, and we could find this out, that would be for their benefit as well, and they wouldn't necessarily fight us on it. So where does that fall in our overall design? How difficult would it be? And how practical a situation is it, being that somebody is now holding a license to that property?
Yeah, it's a good question. So let me try to give as much of an answer as I can. I'm not going to make any sort of recommendation on how you treat this. I think it's inappropriate for me to do so, honestly, being where I'm sitting at this moment, to do so, especially without all the information. I will say that I think that we should be careful about I think that, like, if we were to snap our fingers and change this parcel of land to designated parkland tomorrow, it could potentially change the nature of the relationship with Asphalt Green and Parks. I don't know enough to know how, and I actually, even speaking to our general counsel about this, don't even think we would totally understand that without a very long review of that agreement and the nature of it and blah, 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 blah. And I don't even know, frankly, if I could get the brilliant legal minds in this office to truly focus all of this on a hypothetical level, to tell you the truth. So I want to be careful about what I promise you in terms of like what additional information I find. But I do think it's fair, and Colleen, again, will look to you to tell me, but I think it's fair to assume that it could potentially change the relationship that Asphalt Green has with Parks. If we were to snap our fingers tomorrow and turn this into dedicated parkland. I think it's really, I think that the key player here who's not here is city planning, which would in any sort of, even if we were to snap our fingers and make this designated parkland, it's not like Parks does that. It's city planning that really, like plays kind of the lead role here in so much of this. So it's probably worth like trying to invite Dan or somebody from his team to like kind of do this kind of conversations like this as well. And I'm happy to sit in, happy to bring more people to the table to listen in on these types of things too, if that's at all helpful. But I think that you would probably, when shaping this effort that you guys are putting together, it would be worth like kind of having some of those city planning minds there to figure out those next steps. I also think, to go back to my original statement on this, like looking at what Morningside Heights did for theirs and how they treated park space and that sort of thing would be really helpful to just get a sense of how they treated it. Colleen, I really don't know if there's a better route. And again, I don't want to advise because I don't know enough right now to give sound advice on this. If it would be better, like if they were to, let's say, like carve it out of whatever rezoning proposal that they were going to suggest so that it just stays as is, or if they were to try to include it in and designate it as parkland in that, if there's one, an easier route to go, or two, a better route for the community to do. Do you like have any thoughts on that?
Actually, I'm following you absolutely. And that was what was going through my mind. Without the information as to whether or not, in general, something designated parkland can have licensing arrangements with others, that's a whole legal thing. It's written somewhere. We don't really know about it. If at this moment in time, we feel that Asphalt Green is adequately protected, for the foreseeable future, and it may or may not make sense for us to divert any effort to change that parameter, especially since it may take us down a rabbit hole, which will either blow things up in a negative way or present a situation where we can't really improve, what's happening there now, and it may end up being a futile effort. So if these questions become too complicated, too risky, with so many unknowns that we don't know on what we're embarking, and of course, if there's more research to be had, that's great. But my initial thoughts is if we feel it's adequately protected, we may be best off for the moment accepting it as it is. We can look at it later and concentrate on our immediate effort, which is the residential zoning of what exists at the moment. So any additional information is welcome, but as I say, if it opens up more issues, and creates a problem, it may not be worth going down that path, especially if it's protected.
Can I just
for a while going forward?
And I would say, Michelle, that is exactly why we are having these conversations at this stage. because we don't know what we don't know.
Right,
And we want to make sure that we don't go down a path that would have negative implications.
right.
Can I just, before you go on, if you don't mind, I just want to make sure, Colleen, I always want to check with her because at this point, I'm again, still very much learning and wanted to make sure that I'm not misspeaking. So can you just confirm for me, and if there's anything that you wanted to add to my response, or if I misspoke, can you just let me know?
Sure. I mean, the only thing I would just share generally is that we have many dedicated parks out there with license arrangements. We also have mapped parks with lease arrangements. Not too many leases, but we do. We have, the US Tennis Center in Flushing Meadows Corona Park. We have the other stadia that are technically on, park property, subject of leases. We also have major concessions on parkland as well. Those usually, it's because of the term. And those do require ULIP approval. So I think, Commissioner, what you said before is that, with the idea, if mapping of asphalt green is something that the community board is thinking about, I think, because we have an established relationship with asphalt green with years to go, I think there may not be any concerns, but we certainly would want to check and consider what any implication might be, so I just wanted to clarify that point. And one other thing I should say is that we have many situations where, and most of our parks are mapped on the city map. I just want to say that, but some are not for a variety of reasons. But they can sometimes become mapped at a later time. That does happen. And I should also say that when there is somebody else is proposing an action, either by the city or even by a private applicant, if they're looking for rezoning, there could be a synergy where we have a park property right adjacent to, and if maybe they're making changes to a street or something like that, usually city planning will recommend sort of quote unquote a cleanup of the map. So that has happened where, other actions are going on, and would it be good to clean up the map in essence? So that happens on occasion. We have some going in right now. I know an action in Red Hook because of a city-led resiliency project, and there's a mapping action going on to technically add to an existing park. So things do happen. It's not always at the outset. Typically when we acquire land, which requires a ULIP action, we're getting approval to acquire, and we're also mapping on the city map. We're also covering that action. But I shall say that sometimes we don't do the mapping part because it takes a lot of extra time and money to actually make that change. And because it takes so long for the city to acquire property, we usually make haste and just do a site selection approval and get the acquisition authority. We don't do the city map change. We know we can come back later, and that's not critical for the action that the city wants to carry forward at that point in time. So just a little bit more background on the facets in that land use world and with the city map.
Let's go to Lo Vandervalk and then Judy Schneider.
Yes, my name is Lo Vandervalk. I'm representing Carnegie Hill Neighbors, and it's so nice to see you, Tricia Shimamura, to be
Hello.
with us. And I believe that parks has always been your passion. So we're glad you are where you are.
Thank
I
you.
just wanted to amplify or give some background to the Marx Brothers Playground, which was commented on earlier. The construction on that has not yet started, even though it was approved by the City Council in 2017. It's being held up by a lawsuit. Carnegie Hill Neighbors is one of the members of that lawsuit. The Municipal Art Society, Civitas, and Friends of the Upper East Side are the other partners of this coalition opposing what has happened to the Marx Brothers Playground. You know, it would take maybe a half an hour to explain all the things that happened, so I have to cut it short, unfortunately. But I wanted to at least use this opportunity when you're focused on this question to give some background. What happened was that originally Co-op Tech was to be converted, was to be renewed, renovated, reconstructed, and its land would be used also for a tower. So you'd get a tower and a new Co-op Tech, and that was going to be run by the Educational Construction Fund. That was the manager of the whole ULURP process. So the city council voted to approve. It went through all the processes, and it was alienated. And then, surprise, surprise, the alienation agreement has a requirement that I do not think the sponsors had bothered to look at. That's my interpretation, because they thought it was going to be an easy acquisition of land. What they wanted to do was, because they wanted to build more than just Co-op Tech, they wanted 2 high schools in addition, and they also wanted 25 to 30% affordable housing. And that overloaded the developer to a huge extent. And so the tower became taller and taller until it reached more than 700 feet. And however, the alienation agreement had a specification that the developers had to put in place a plan to compensate for the taking of the park, and to compensate in kind and in money, either another playground somewhere in Manhattan or improvements in the parks department. That, in the parks, New York City parks. The city has not been able to do that. And so the lawsuit just sits there. Actually, we lost the lawsuit, but the city knows that this is a requirement it has to meet, and it can't meet it. So we're looking forward to a resolution. And we would work constructively on a resolution, and we have some specific plans on that. I do want to say that, but our goal is to get the parkland that was taken to be restored to parkland, because that's a lot cheaper and more cost effective than trying to just compensate for money in kind, which the city is pressed with funding not to do. So we'll see what happens. I hope at some future time we can lay out what we think are some reasonable alternatives. But we very much want to restore that to parkland, and it's not in the catchment area of CB8. It's in the catchment area of CB11. At that time, the city council speaker was also the council member of CB11, and she pushed it very hard. So I just want to give this as clarification. If you want to email Carnegie Hill neighbors, I will be glad to answer other questions. But and I'm glad to make an appearance in the future if you wish us to clarify. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lo. Judy Schneider.
Welcome, Trish. It's always so nice to see you. Thank you for coming back to your home. I have 2 questions. Colleen, I'm not quite sure I understood. If this was to become a park, it has to be approved by the state. Is that what you said?
Colleen, you're muted.
Sorry if I was not clear. I was just saying that if there was a change to the city map, there's no approval needed by the state. That's a local land use process. It would require ULURP. So currently, as the commissioner was saying, there was no alteration map for the mapping of asphalt green. I should just say the last city map change involving the parcel was to demap technically what is right of way. There was one action many, many years ago for 91st Street, and then there was a follow-up action for another parcel across the block that was right of way. So that happened, but in those steps, there was no action with those city map changes to also map it as a park. So if that is what the community board is asking about, or any city map change requires the ULURP, which is a local process, as you know, it doesn't involve the state. No, the state is involved if anyone is proposing a non-park use on what is dedicated parkland. That's where the state legislature comes into play. No, it doesn't have anything to do with a change to the city map.
Okay, thank you.
And- I'm sorry,
I
Judy, can I just
understand.
ask a follow-up to something Colleen said and then come back to you? Can you
Okay.
define what is a non-park use of a park?
Well, anything, it could be a school, a fire station, housing, anything that is not a park use.
Would a recreation facility like organization like Asphalt Green be considered a non-park use?
I don't think so. And one other thing I should just say is that it gets a little tricky here, but in the zoning resolution, there is a definition of public park. But we have many recreation centers in parks, so that are
Right.
mapped. So I personally don't think that would be an issue. The Asphalt Green functions like, it has programming like other recreation centers. So I don't see that as a, non-park use.
Thank you. Sorry, Judy, please go ahead.
That's fine. And so this question is either for you or for Elsa Pereira. Have you spoken with city planning? Does Asphalt Green want to become a park? Because I know how the money they take in and all of that will be handled totally differently if it becomes a park than the way they're operating now under their current agreement. So I'm just wondering if you and Adam have had a discussion, if not with Elsa, anyone else at Asphalt Green, and are they interested in doing this?
So I'm gonna give a brief response to that of the conversations that I've had thus far with Asphalt Green, and then Elsa, I would welcome if you'd like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about just your role. So we reached out to Jordan Brackett, who is the executive director of Asphalt Green, a couple of months ago at this point, just to let him know that this, as we were looking at all of the manufacturing and commercially zoned blocks on the Upper East Side as part of this study, that this block fell into that category, that it is not our intention to propose rezoning this block for residential use. But on the contrary, that we would like to see the Asphalt Green use protected for the future. Full and fair disclosure, Jordan is a former colleague of mine from the Department of Education. We know each other well. And so it was a very friendly conversation. And he appreciated that we were at least considering this and flagging it for them so that Asphalt Green could also begin understanding what the potential implications might be. There is, I think at this point, certainly no strong point of view as to whether making this parkland is a good thing or a negative thing. We're all in investigative mode. And I think that what we agree upon is that we would like this to continue to be operated in the manner in which it's currently being operated, that it be a strong recreational programming location in our community. And that I think everybody is very happy with the work that Asphalt Green is doing. So I will, that's the preamble of the conversations that we have had thus far with Asphalt Green. I did have the pleasure of meeting Elsa this morning on a Zoom so that we would not be strangers when this meeting occurred. And so I'd love to just turn it over to Elsa to introduce herself.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you for including me tonight. Jordan sends his regrets. He could not make it, so he asked me to come in his place. Jordan is the CEO at Asphalt Green. I am the Chief Operating Officer. I have been there for about 6 months, so I'm still very new and very much in listening mode. We've been there for many, many years, and we would love to be there for many, many years to come. Our goal is to make all of the spaces that we have there as accessible to as many people as possible. So part of our mission statement is sports, fitness, and play for all. And so we strongly believe in that. We do have community hours. We haven't done as good a job in communicating all of those hours. So we have a project internally to actually have a live calendar of Litwin Field hours so people can come. They know beforehand if the field will be available for public use. It's available online. And so I have some of the hours, but Litwin Field is typically available 8 hours a day. Sundial Plaza, a lot of people don't know this, but it's also available where the picnic tables are. That's actually available on most weekdays from 8 to 9 p.m., 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. and 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. on weekends. That's not online, but we can add that if that's if that's of interest, and that's something that, if you let me know, we will plan to publish that. And then we also do a lot of community events. We have the sprinkler days. We had 6,000 people on that field for Asphalt Screams. And actually on Saturday, we're hosting Big Swim in the Aqua Center. It's a whole day of just swimming for kids, teenagers, all the way up to master swimmers. So that's a really exciting thing that we do. But we're really happy to be there. We, with this license agreement, we know we have 7 years left, and we're interested in knowing sooner rather than later about whether we are able to stay there, just because there are some we have expenses to take care of the space. And so we want to be smart with investing our money. So I have a degree in urban planning and environmental policy, and I come from the settlement house world. That was my previous job. So I'm focused on the community, and Asphalt Green has been an amazing place to build my operations career and be in a place that serves so many amazing different kinds of people.
Well, thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much.
Judy, your virtual hand is still raised. Is there more that you'd like to?
No, that's a good start, but I really think we need an answer to that question before we as a committee take this any further, that they would be in agreement, because I don't think we'd want to do something that they were not in agreement with. That was my only thought. But thank you for having them.
Of course. Couldn't imagine having this conversation without them at the table. Right. I think last call for any questions or comments on the Asphalt Green discussion and the parks discussion before we move on to our next agenda item.
You have one, Elizabeth Rose. Oh, two.
Okay, I saw Rusosa try to raise his real hand, and Diego has his virtual hand up. So I saw Ru's real hand first.
I think my virtual hand is raised, but the skin tone might not be able
I
to
see
use,
it
might not
now
be
in
able
the
to see the
corner.
skin tone.
Thank you.
Yeah. So is there dangers or hardship that Asphalt Green is facing that could be fended off by a parkland designation?
Great question. Is there a value to Asphalt Green specifically if they could be helped by a parkland designation? Great question.
Is that question for me? I don't have the answer. We do want to stay there for the long term, and so we would be interested in whatever is most advantageous to allow us to do that. We're learning along with this group, so I don't have the answer. I don't know.
Can I just maybe at the risk of like saying though, I mean, let me just see if I've got this right here. But if Elizabeth Rose is saying that the goal here is just to keep things going as they are going, which is that they have a license with us, it's long-term, we've renewed it before, but this is 7 more years of this or whatever. My guess would be that if you want to keep things as is, then to keep things as would be my guess. I mean, that would be it. Not to get into, because as I said before, should we get into like a dedicated parkland or mapping the parkland, that could change the nature of the relationship with Asphalt Green. I have no idea how necessarily, but it would just mean a different type of relationship. Colleen, can you like tell me if that's correct? Like if it could change that relationship.
Yeah, I think we're not sure, but
Okay.
I think certainly it's been going okay, right? Since 1989, that's pretty long. I guess I don't know, I didn't read the current agreement, what it speaks to renewal. I guess we could certainly go back and just take a look at that, and hearing what else is said, just thinking ahead about that, what that process might look like, to renew it, the existing license, and when that process should begin. We can certainly talk to our general counsel about that. But yeah, I mean, to date, it hasn't been an issue, even though Asphalt Green is not mapped on the city map. So, but you guys are trying to be protective of Asphalt Green and considering, does mapping, add benefit to making sure that this open space is for perpetuity. So I don't know, there's the relationship with Asphalt Green. I think we don't know the answer if it would change anything. Yeah.
Great. Okay. All right, Mr. Barberena.
Well, I have 2 comments. One is about the hours of Asphalt Green. I think the easiest way to let the people know is putting a sign. For example, the field is open to the public for certain hours, like all the public plazas in the city. And the other one, I think opening the pool like once a month to the public, like to everyone, not just the members, it would be nice. That's it.
All right. Well, Trisha and Colleen, thank you so much for coming, for participating, for bringing what you can. I think, there may be follow-up in the future, and we'd love to have you back if that is the case. And Elsa, thank you so much also for joining and being part of the conversation. Obviously, we would not want to have it without you, and we're delighted to have you with us, both in this committee and in the broader Asphalt Green presence in our community. So we'll give you guys the rest of your evenings back from here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we'll exit. But thank you, and happy to work with Trisha to get back to you on any questions that might arise or be going forward.
Yeah, and
okay.
Obviously you all know this, but I see Adam almost on a weekly basis, so our routes are like pretty much the same when we go to work or pick up our kids or do whatever. But you all know me very personally. You know how much I care for this community, and in general, our job in parks is to want to take care of parks. Like, want to make sure that they're open, safe, accessible to everybody. So if there's ever a question you want me to come back, obviously I will jump at the chance. to be here. And this is just the start of a long working relationship with this committee and in this new role. But just kind of continuing on the good relationship with Parks. So I'll see you all soon. Don't share my personal cell phone number. Bye.
Thank you for including me. Bye.
Good night. All right. Let's go back to our agenda, our second agenda item of the evening. So we've been talking over the past several meetings about potential zones and what different zone characteristics were. We've talked about a series of hypotheses about how would we select a zone, and as a reminder, or for those who were not here, this was sort of the hypothesis chart that we shared at the last meeting. And I think we are now all ready, and I actually think some of the participants are chomping at the bit for us to say, okay, rubber meets the road. Let's look at specific blocks and make specific choices for what we might recommend. And so that is what we are beginning to do tonight. So I will go through just a reminder of the hypotheses, and then we will jump in to the two blocks that we would like to specifically discuss, and hopefully get to some sort of a consensus on, placeholder. This is where we think we might want to propose a specific type of zone. So these were the hypotheses that all of the first was that we would look for an FAR probably equal to or greater than 6.5. 6.5, as a reminder, is the FAR that is available for a community use facility on all of these blocks today. They could be as big as a 6.5. And that therefore our rationale here is at least equivalent to what could be built today. Our goal is to have the development be residential, not to down zone from what is current. So a conversion, not a down. A second hypothesis is that we would like the FAR chosen, of the zone that we chose, to ensure that all or almost all parcels, all the lots within the rezoned area would meet MIH requirements if it were redeveloped, which means a minimum of 12,500 square feet. A developer could still, put into a fund or opt out of that. So ideally, 25,000 square feet. And specifically, there are some locations here where you could imagine a lot being converted into a brand new single family townhouse, or a luxury only development. And that is not our goal here. We want to ensure that any new developments include affordable housing. At the same time, we don't want to over propose. If you don't need a 10-12 FAR in order to achieve those above two goals, why necessarily propose that FAR? And more specifically, and particularly since most of what we're looking at are mid-block lots, we want to try to recreate or match the typical Upper East Side of taller buildings on the avenue and lower density or lower height on the mid-block. There is definitely a lot of concern that we've heard about height limits, and that would push us towards a contextual zone type, because those are the only types of zones that require or have a height limit or an envelope for a building. There are a couple of avenue fronting blocks here, and we are seeing both of the blocks we are looking at tonight are avenue fronting. And so the hypothesis is we would reflect the zones that are adjacent or across from the from the blocks in question, with similar avenue fronting zone types. And then obviously we would, grandfather existing uses, and encourage paired or mixed use, approaches here. So all that said, we're going to talk about 2 blocks. Block 1474 is the block from 61st to 62nd Street from York to the river that is currently the Bentley Hotel and the Animal Medical Center. And then block 1456 is the block across from that, but just back from York Avenue, that goes from 61st to 62nd and fully from First Avenue to the buildings that are fronting York Avenue. This larger section here, this salmon covered section, which is the 60 to 61st Street block, we're going to defer discussion of that block to the next meeting. It has many, many more lots. It's a much more complicated block. And so this is kind of a, let's do these 2 first and see how it goes and see what we learn from it before we try to tackle this one, which is kind of there's just lots more going on here. So with that, this is now again a refresher. If you've been coming, you've seen this slide before. This block has 2 lots on it. Lot 31 is the Bentley Hotel, and lot 40 is the Animal Medical Center. So these currently have a commercial FAR of 5.0. They have a community facility FAR of 6.5. There is currently no height limit for either of the for this type of zone. In all of our discussions, I think everybody has agreed we really would like the Animal Medical Center to continue in this location, and that I think is the context. So let's take a look at some pictures. So here on the far left is, you can see the current building of the Bentley Hotel. You can see the Animal Medical Center behind. This is obviously clearly under construction. The Bentley Hotel is about 20 stories. The Animal Medical Center is about 14. What is the context in which this building or these lots operate? Well, immediately opposite is a fully residential building along York Avenue. This is a 19-story residential building. And here on, oops, sorry, didn't mean to click to the next stage. Here on the far right, this is also immediately opposite. You can see the edge of this building in the middle photo. This is actually a 16-story building, but you can see it is clearly taller than the adjacent residential building. And this is part of Memorial Sloan Kettering. So this is height and number of stories do not completely align, but we did want to at least give everyone a sense of what you would see. So that's the block immediately opposite and facing the Bentley Hotel. Just to be clear, the zone that covers these buildings, I believe, is C28. Diagonally across to the southwest is a 2-building residential development. This is zoned C47, and these buildings are 37 stories tall. Diagonally northwest is an R8 zoned building. It is 12 stories tall. It's fully residential, and it's the full block front, diagonally northwest. And immediately north is an R10 zoned building, or buildings. They are 26 stories tall. And actually both of these 2 residential buildings in the center and on the right, these are all housing related to the local hospitals. So this is surrounded by residential high-rise buildings. So in this case, we believe that the two hypotheses that prevail are that avenue zones should mirror the adjacent or opposite zone blocks in order to create consistency. And we want to encourage paired and mixed use and grandfather existing uses. So for this block, Adam's and my initial proposal would be a zone of C19 or R10, but basically mirror the residential density that is on literally basically 3 of the 4 blocks immediately around it, and provide the similar density. Now, the Animal Medical Center, a point here is if they did not wish to fully utilize the density or were unable to fully utilize the density, that there would be the potential here to merge zoning lots with the Bentley Hotel building and transfer some development rights there. But this was this is where the initial hypotheses brought us. So with that, I actually want to stop before we go on and just talk about that block so far. Okay, Michelle. Adam, please.
I just wanted to say 2 things. The first thing is that the Bentley would be overbuilt as a residential building. So altering the zoning would bring it in line to be underbuilt slightly under a 10 FAR or a 12 FAR for MIH. And additionally, Elizabeth and I, we initially had a little bit of a disagreement about how to treat this block, but her point was fair, and I'm coming around on it a little bit, but the land use rationale to have different zones for each of the lots, while it may be appropriate, I'm just wondering if DCP would really sign off on that, where each lot gets its own zone. That's not usually how they do these things, but the idea that the animal medical would potentially retain its current zone or something similar to its current zoning density, whereas the Bentley may be upzoned in order to create essentially a complying building, or a building that could be converted to residential uses at its current density, was something that we were going back and forth on. But we're happy to hear everyone's
we are in complete agreement that the avenue facing lot should be an R10 equivalent. Where we had some disagreement amongst the 2 of us was, should we also upzone the Animal Medical Center lot? So that is now complete disclosure of our discussion. So let's hear what you all are thinking. Michelle.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of questions. I'm not completely clear. And number one, I think when we talk about the number of stories, we have to talk about feet, because each of these buildings, and especially if you talk about institutional buildings, hospitals, etc., they can tell you it's 250 feet, but it's 12 stories high, because they are not using the 10-story high thing. So
Michelle,
I think we have to talk.
I completely agree with you. The reason that we are using stories is the data I was able to find. And if Adam can show me how to find feet, I would be delighted to use feet, but I could not find it.
Okay, well, we can deal with that, but where we can get feet in the newer projects as they're proposed, they're usually quoted in feet. So where we can use it, let's do that, because we'll get a better perspective of the height of what we're actually talking about.
Yes, we can add feet, and that's I should have added.
Okay,
feet.
if you can find that, that's great.
Well, so for 1133 York, it's 259 feet.
So it's almost okay. So if you went by 10 feet per story, in your head, you have to think of like a 26-story building.
Right,
Even
but
though
these are,
it may be
these are
20.
Yeah, but these are very tall metal
Right.
floors. It's like what we saw with
Exactly.
the Blood Center.
Well,
which
it's like if you
they're
go to look
required.
at Sloan Kettering now,
Right.
their shorter building is 350 feet high, but they'll
Right.
tell you it's a 20-story building.
Right.
But it's the equivalent of a 35-story building. We just have to do that to sort of get that picture in our heads. But also, my question is, were all of these buildings that you mentioned, were they originally built as of right?
I don't have an answer for that.
That may take some real investigation to figure that out.
Does knowing that help us in any way, or doesn't it matter?
I think for the most part, it doesn't matter because it is not so much this building is 29 stories, this building is 19 stories, as it is this building is zoned for R10 or R10 equivalent, or this building is zoned for R8B.
Okay,
or
but that's
R8.
what we're changing it to.
And so what we are looking at is not just how many stories or how tall things are, but what is the as of right zone that is surrounding the properties that we are proposing to upzone. And you'll see that a little bit more clearly in the next
So
block.
let me ask you a question about the animal hospital, which our general consensus at our last meeting pretty much was like, we would like it to remain. We're fine with the height that it is. I don't know if under the current zoning, it could conceivably someday add additional height. I don't know if that's possible or not. But at the moment, and from what I can tell visually, it's built out. Does it complete the envelope? It's built to the property line?
I believe it's slightly underbuilt, and that was something that was, I think they discussed that at the meeting before when they came before the signage.
So if it's underbuilt, what does that mean to us? And if we say it's underbuilt, that doesn't necessarily refer to the current zoning designation. That refers to the building envelope, correct?
So it is currently built to a 4.96 FAR. So that's what it's built to.
So do you have a proposal for that? Just that spot?
Well,
are you suggesting anything there?
So this is where Adam and I were initially split. Our proposal took the argument that Adam made, which is that the Department of City Planning is not likely to approve two adjacent zones on the same block, giving them different treatment. We believe the avenue fronting lot, and we are in complete agreement that the avenue fronting lot should be zoned to an R10 equivalent.
And that's the Bentley block. That's the Bentley
block. And the block opposite is zoned for R10 equivalent. The diagonal block is zoned for R10 equivalent. The block to the north is zoned for R10 equivalent. The diagonal block to the northwest is zoned for R8.
Well, yeah, it's R8, but there is R10 on the avenue. But yes, most of the block is R8, yes.
Yeah. So all of the surrounding blocks are zoned for R10. R10 equivalent. We are in firm agreement that the Bentley Hotel lot should be zoned to an R10 equivalent. And
now, when you say that,
or pure R10, is another nuance.
So let me understand something. Because I saw on the image, there there was a gas station next to the Bentley years ago, and now there's virtually nothing there.
Yep.
So you're saying that that empty lot at the moment, I'm just trying to understand, is what you want to zone to R10, but that's
Not-
a separate lot from the Bentley, or is
No.
that okay,
The Bentley lot encompasses
that lot?
the property that is the Bentley Hotel plus the currently unbuilt, uncovered space
Right.
directly on York Avenue.
Okay, so if we decided to zone that R10, does that automatically put the Bentley in violation?
To my understanding, it creates a grandfathered non-compliant use. And it can
On the
continue.
so that if there's development on this now unbuilt, that would have, if our proposal went through, that would have to be built or could be built to R10. And the Bentley would not be required to do anything, either upload or down zone, because it would be grandfathered in as it currently exists.
So if you were to build on that lot without changing the Bentley Hotel itself, you could only build something that represented the difference in the FAR from what is already built and what would be allowed under R10. You couldn't create a brand new 10 FAR building in addition to the Bentley. That is
right.
all
Because it's one zoning lot. It's one
Yes.
zoning lot.
It's one zoning
One
lot.
zoning. So if we went to that R10, how many foot high and how many FAR could you build on that now unbuilt portion of that zoning lot?
So it's overbuilt. You could build nothing. Under the current zoning, it's overbuilt.
No, but if you were to change it to an R10.
Right. So if you were to change it to an R10, and the assumption is it would be a 12 FAR with the inclusionary housing component.
And what would that, what height would that be?
The height, we're not sure what the height would be. It would be determined by what we end up choosing, whether contextual or non-contextual zone. But the idea is that you'd be able to have 167,000 roughly zoning square feet on that site. And the site is currently improved with a building of roughly 133,000 square feet.
But let me understand this. If you did
let's
that,
put a button on that. If you were to upzone this lot, they would be about 35,000 square feet underbuilt. So in order to build something substantial, they would have to tear down the hotel and rebuild from scratch, or it would simply enable the hotel itself to be converted to long-term residential housing.
isn't that possible now?
I don't think so.
No.
No.
All right, let me ask you this. Doing that with an aim of getting some level of affordable housing, R10 doesn't give you that. R10A gives you that. R10A allows you to add 20% to a 250-foot building if you include affordable housing.
Both R10 and R10A are eligible under the inclusionary housing program. What we are suggesting under the rezoning is that it would be mandatory inclusionary housing and it would be required affordable. Currently, the R10 and the R10A programs are voluntary inclusionary housing programs. wherein you may purchase inclusionary housing certificates to bonus your site from a 10 to a 12, or you can develop a portion of the site with on-site affordable, and that on-site affordable would generate inclusionary housing bonuses to bring your site from a 10 to a 12, so long as the affordable is under 80% AMI.
But I understood that the R10A was the zoning that permitted a 20% height bonus for inclusionary housing. What does R10?
Both the R10 and the R10A zoning districts allow the inclusionary housing program, the voluntary inclusionary housing program, which allows you to bonus your
So
site.
what's the difference between them? What's the difference between an R10 and an R10A?
Simply, it's R10A is a contextual district with a stated height of 210 feet, or if you develop on-site affordable,
20 more.
a height of 235 feet. R10 does not have a stated height cap.
Does not have a what? A height
Does
cap?
not have a height cap.
Okay, in general, let me make a general statement then. I'm very concerned about rezoning to something without a height cap.
Okay.
So I think we ought to think about that as we look at each of these, because that's one of our very, very big issues. And as you well know, this community board has a resolution of proposing special districts on York 1st, 2nd, and 3rd to have a 210 height cap.
Right.
So
And while we do have that resolution, the Department of City Planning has
turned it, well, they haven't formally turned us down.
I
They
mean,
mainly
they
have not heard us.
They-
Let's put it that way. They haven't heard us. We have not gotten a formal turn down. I would submit their overall philosophy here that these tall buildings are going to yield them affordable housing. Not only don't I believe it's true, but it has not been proven to be true, because we've got 350 and 400-foot buildings going up left and right, and they are underdeveloped buildings. They are low-density buildings. So let's give them what we want, not so much what they're telling us they think will yield, what they think it will yield. I don't think it will.
And in the case of this project and of these blocks, any zone that we choose will be a mandatory inclusionary zone, because we are up zoning. And mandatory inclusionary housing law means that any block that we are changing the zone for to make residential will be a mandatory inclusionary housing.
Okay, but it doesn't include a height limit. I'm interested in
the height
that.
So
in addition,
you would be in favor of use R10A. Okay, thank you. Judy.
Okay, I'm a little confused. So let me present something to you. Let's say the Bentley doesn't exist and we have an empty lot there.
Yes.
What is the total height limit 235 feet?
well, it
Under
depends what you choose.
R10A.
So which one are you suggesting, R10 or R10A?
Well, we were suggesting an R10,
Which
and
would
we're
allow
hearing feedback.
210 feet would be R10, right?
There's no height limit on R10.
No height limit at all. And I think we all know the animal center is going nowhere. It's staying where it is. They're investing a lot of money now to put this addition on. They're going to have some footage. I don't know how much footage they're going to have left. And if they were to take down the Bentley and build on that, you can be sure they would buy whatever they could from the animal medical center to make their building taller. But if we go to R10, you're saying there's no limit how tall they could build. Would they have to have mandatory inclusionary housing in R10?
Yes.
Well, I think I'm in agreement with Michelle on this one. I don't think I'd like to see a no height limit on this block because there is every chance in the world, knowing these owners, they could possibly sell this piece of property at one time. They were in talks with someone. They could sell this piece of property and the hotel could be taken down and they could build something else, particularly if there was no height limit on the lot. So, and I would do whatever we do, I would do for the whole lot. And obviously the animal medical center would be grandfathered. Okay, when we get to the across the street, one of the other buildings was misidentified, but I'll hold that until we get there.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this particular block? As I will recap, it sounds like there is general preference for a contextual zone with a height limit, even on this avenue location. But that I'm not hearing a disagreement that the underlying FAR would not be an R10 equivalent. Let's go to Craig.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm not sure if either of you would know this offhand, but just based off of the lot sizes and the FARs we're talking about, no, there wouldn't be height limits in an R10, but what would effectively be the worst case scenario for a building that would be built given the size over there in terms of height? Because I think just my general feeling is I don't know that if we were to vote again on a 210-foot height limit and as a board, that knowing what we know now and understanding better the implications of what we consider to be a housing crisis, that would be as popular as it was when this was passed back in 2017, I think. And that's not to say that there aren't appropriate potential height limits, but I'm wondering if there is what this worst case scenario would be, or if we're talking about something that would be higher than 210 in some way to allow us to be able to get more affordable housing units through MIH. What would that entail? And you may not even know that right now, and that may take some work, but
Well, we can do a little math. A 12 FAR on this lot is 167,000 square feet. With let's assume for a minute that Bentley Hotel doesn't exist. It's a white sheet of paper, greenfield lot. They would require a 30-foot rear yard. So the buildable lot would be 200 feet by 50 feet. So that's a 10,000 square foot floor plate. And if you assume 167,000 square feet of FAR divided by a 10,000 square foot floor plate, you're basically at a 17-story building. Now, how tall could a 17-story building be? That is another question, shall we say. But, let's say that that's if you say that every one of those stories is a 20-foot slab to slab height, now that's a 340-foot tall building.
right. I just want to make the distinction between something that is more contextual within the neighborhood and what you see on avenues versus something. I know when you hear the phrase no height limit, I think it raises alarm bells, and I understand why some people would be concerned about that. I just want to differentiate between something that could result in a super tall that no one wants versus something that is more tolerable to more people, especially if it would achieve our affordable housing goals. So I'm not, and I'm not being prescriptive here. It's just
Yeah.
I just want to raise that sort of as a counterpoint,
And-
not to take away from anyone who may believe that that an R10A may be more appropriate, and that's fine if that's what it is. But I just want to present that.
And I
other
think it is a good
piece.
point. What we don't know is, would a developer come in and say, I'm only going to build on 100 by 50, and now it's a 35-story building, and, you know, assume a 15-foot slab to slab height, you could have a pretty tall building. It would just be narrower.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Michelle?
Also, I think we have to think of or take into consideration what many developers are doing now, because when they build, the money is at the top of the building. And what they're doing is creating, putting mechanicals or other mechanism that supports the building, putting it in the middle of the building, because that space does not count towards the overall height of the building. So you could put 20, 30 feet of mechanical space in the middle of the building, which then raises the height of the building and doesn't count towards the height of a building. Now, I don't know if you can do that like in an R10A. Adam would know that. Elizabeth would know that. I don't know. But that is a caveat as to when you're talking about height, to recognize the fact that whatever height we may impose could conceivably be a percentage much, much taller, because it is permissible to put mechanicals in the middle and they don't necessarily count towards the overall height of the building. But when you're talking about mandatory inclusionary housing, and you're going to do that no matter what the zoning is, that dictates a certain percentage, does it not? So we don't necessarily have to have height in order to get that percentage. In other words, you just can get that percentage. So you may end up with the same percentage of affordable housing because of the mandate and the rules that govern that. Correct? Yeah.
Yes.
So given that, to my mind, if we can get the affordable housing we want, and have control, I think it's better to get it in a contextual building than in a non-contextual building, and something that has an unknown to it, because then it becomes the possibility of building as of right, which means that then things may not even come to us. In other words, it's out of our hands. So I certainly wouldn't set up that scenario. Why would we do that as a community board?
Well, let's talk about the idea of contextual for a moment. A quick search on Department of Buildings shows that the block directly north of block 1474 has buildings that are as tall as 397 feet. We just discussed that 1133 York is 259 feet. So to limit a development to 210 feet would not be contextual. It is not in context with the high-rise developments immediately opposite to the west and to the north of this block.
But it is with the animal hospital.
Right, but the animal hospital is not a residential development.
No, but it's on that.
Right, but we are looking at, I mean, again, of course, this is all just discussion.
Well,
but-
then let's not use the word contextual. Then I would just say that I would prefer the R10A. With the possible bonus of 20%, but you're saying that you're gonna ask for MIH anyway. So I would rather have that has the height limit.
All right,
And would be more in keeping with the red building in the center, the red brick building in the center of the photo, the center photo that you have on the screen now. The solo project, the black glass one,
Right.
that's sort of on the 60th Street border.
Mhm.
I don't think with what we're doing, we have to actually even address those buildings. If you go down that block, which is 60th Street, 60th or 61st, that block doesn't have anything with that height or any other height. There are small buildings, garages. The Cornell building is there with the circular driveway. I don't think it's more than 9-10 stories high. So I don't think we have to concern ourselves with the solo building.
Well, it is, to be fair, it is part of the context. I think we don't need to come to a final decision on this tonight. I think we've identified what the issue is. We seem to all be circling around height concerns. I don't think we're circling right now around FAR concerns. So the question is, what does contextual mean for this context? And I think that, you know, this is not a one and done conversation tonight. This is a process. What I'd really like to do is go on to talk about the next block, and sort of just put a pin in. We're agreed that it's a FAR equivalent of 10 with a bonus of 2 for mandatory MIH. And there's and let's acknowledge that there is disagreement and concern about height. Yes? Can we do that and look at the next block?
Yeah, we can. Let me just ask you, do you have, just you in your thinking, have a timeline on this? When you say there'll be another conversation about this, do you have a some kind of a timeline where you would like to have final resolutions on all of this?
Well, I think part of this is a learning process of how much time does it take to talk about each one of these blocks? Because this is 2 out of how many, Adam? 8?
To go back to the present day, yes, I think
Yeah.
it is 8.
So, you know,
Friedland's gone. Friedland's gone.
This is a multi-month process at a minimum, and
10.
we will get to the goal is to get to a point where we have a proposal for the board to vote on, and basically what we would need the board as a whole to vote on is, should we in fact develop a formal upzoning proposal, which would then have to go to Department of City Planning for their feedback, before it then is even considered and begin a discussion and potential negotiation with Department of City Planning. But we at least need a straw man of, you know, here's our starting point to get to a point where we can ask the board to say, yes, we should in fact develop a formal proposal and present it to the Department of City Planning. So this is not, whatever we say in this committee, you know, there is lots still to come. And I think
Understood.
this is one where, you know, we could certainly go in with an R10A, and Department of City Planning may very well come back and say, you got 390 feet across, diagonally across there, you've got 360 feet across there. There is no way that, you know, 235 is context. We don't know. But anyway, I think that is where we are. I'm clearly hearing, you know, concern about no height limit. I think we recognize that, we acknowledge it. What is our then strategy? Let's keep going. We'll put a pin on, you know, we agree that it's R10 from a zoning, from an FAR perspective. We're still hashing out do you put a height limit on it in this particular context? And I think in this particular context, there is conflicting data. There are buildings that are already around it that are very tall. There are buildings that are already around it that are not as tall. It's not singular. Okay, I'm gonna, with trepidation, push onward. This is the next block. And my computer has just given me your battery is running low. Block 1456. So this block fronts First Avenue up here between 61st and 62nd, and it goes most of the way towards Second Avenue, but not all the way towards Second Avenue. Towards York Avenue. On York Avenue itself, as we've already seen and discussed, the buildings are R10 equivalent buildings. We're talking about an avenue fronting on First Avenue, and then some mid-block buildings. And there are obviously multiple lots and of irregular shapes on this block. So there are 3 frontages, and let's first look just at the avenue frontage. The avenue frontage along First Avenue, currently you've got the self-storage unit at 62nd Street. You've got a group of older tenement buildings in the middle of the block, and then you've got a commercial building on the 61st Street corner of Goodwill. Directly opposite, this is now the west side of that same street. The block directly opposite is zoned C28. That is an R10 equivalent zone, meaning a 10 FAR. At this point, that block is voluntary for inclusionary housing. No matter what we do, a change in zoning on the eastern side of the block would be a mandatory inclusionary housing. So directly opposite is an R10 equivalent. Directly north along First Avenue on the east side is also zoned C19. That is an R10 equivalent. So it hasn't yet been redeveloped, but it could be developed with, again, a 10 FAR, no height limit, and a potential 20% voluntary inclusionary bonus. So 12 FAR. Directly south on the east side of First Avenue is this building. It is a C47 zone, which is an R10 equivalent zone. It is 38 stories tall. It is residential. And obviously it has commercial on the ground floors. Diagonally southwest is the block 1435 that we will be discussing at our next meeting. This is currently part of our study. And we would propose new zoning for this block. Diagonally northwest, this block is zoned C28. Again, it does not appear to have been redeveloped, but it is zoned for R10 equivalent with no height limit and voluntary inclusionary bonus of 2 FAR. So it could be a 12 FAR, no height limit. So we're looking at this yellow portion of the zones of the lots. We think the dominant hypothesis here is that the avenue zones should mirror the adjacent and opposite block zone types for consistent zoning, which in this case would mean a C28, which is an R10 equivalent zone. There's one caveat here, which is lot 46, which is the storage facility lot. That lot is 131.5 feet deep. Consistent with avenue zoning, we would only propose zoning that C28 to a depth of 100 feet, not the full depth of the lot. So that's the avenue front. If you now look at the side street, you start with the Goodwill building that we've just described, in which we've put a placeholder that it would be rezoned to C28. Adjacent to it is a currently former old tenement style building, residential 5 stories. Adjacent to that is a commercial condo that is approximately 7 stories. Moving further east, you have, this is the Colonial Dames building. I'm not sure in what ways this is protected, and so I put a question mark there. Then there is the Mount Vernon Hotel, which is an individual landmark, and so it is protected. And then there is a 13-story commercial condo building. So this is the
North side.
sorry, this is the north side. I apologize that it doesn't say that it says south side. This
Right.
is the north side. This is the block that we're discussing as part of rezoning. Immediately opposite that, the south side is a mixed zone block. It has some R8 equivalent and it has some R9 equivalent immediately across the street. So you can see this is the 38-story building that fronts the avenue. There is continued residential down the rest of the block that is a mix of R8 and R9 equivalents. And then towards the far eastern end of the block is the solo site. So here is our yellow tracker of what we're describing. And it consists of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zoning lots. And here we think there are 2 dominant hypotheses. We want to use a minimum lot FAR to ensure that all or most lots meet the mandatory inclusionary housing requirements. And we believe there should be a contextual zone here to create height limit, which reflects both what is going on across the street, where the mid block is a lower height density, and to protect the avenues are taller, mid blocks are shorter. So here we would propose an R8A zone, which is sort of the closest FAR that we could come to that exists to the current 6.5 community facility potential. It comes pretty close to what is required for MIH for lot 5, but not quite. But that said, that's one lot. Out of this. So it seems to be splitting the middle a bit, and potentially those commercial condominiums could be converted to residential. And certainly lot 5 could theoretically at some point be redeveloped to more modern residential as well. And then the big question mark here is the Colonial Dames building, which I don't know what protection exists there. If you then look at the north side of the block, which is the south side of 62nd Street, this is what exists. You again have on the avenue the Manhattan Storage Building. You then have what appears to be a commercial building adjacent to that. It is technically 6 stories. It appears to be much taller than 6 stories. Then, and this runs the full mid-block. It's a very wide building. And then this is that same 13-story commercial condo that you saw adjacent to the Mount Vernon Hotel. It is a through block lot, and you can enter the building from either side. And then next to that on York Avenue is the 19-story residential building. So this is what's currently there. If you look across the street directly north, the entire block of the mid-block is R8. And that is, again, the medical faculty staff housing. It is a 12-story building. It has a beautiful large center garden. It is where all of my children's nursery school parties were held. But we do see a 12-story building immediately to the north. So here is the yellow tracker showing us this would cover a partial lot that is currently the Manhattan Mini Storage, the very wide mid-block site, and then this side of that single through block lot that is the commercial condo. And here we again would be proposing R8A, so that we make the entire mid-block on both the north side and the south side of this block consistent, and consistent with the heights of the buildings both to the south and to the north, so that it is indeed contextual. And I think that is, yes, that is our last for discussion slide. So let me switch back to Zoom so I can see you all.
Seems to me that Judy just wants to raise her hand and congratulate us and say that this is perfect. And everyone.
Thank you, Judy.
Well, I do want to congratulate you all. Everything is just perfect. Actually, I think I need to spend a little time talking to you and Elizabeth off after the meeting is over during the week. We'll pick a time.
Absolutely.
Give you some of the history of some of these buildings and the tall solo lot and across the street and whatever. That was formerly the Glick site. Okay, and he got it rezoned and then he went broke and never built any of what he was building. So people bought off his pieces. Tell me, what's the difference between R8 and R8A?
Height limit.
And what's an A?
Has a height limit.
Of, I mean, what is that?
I think with the inclusionary be 145.
Okay, I got it.
And then R8 would be a height factor, where the height is determined by open space.
Okay. All right, that was just my question on that. I didn't know what the A stood, what it meant.
It basically requires both the height limit and that the developer use the quality housing standards.
Okay. I have nothing else for right now. I think you both did a great job and a lot of work. And I think I could give you some information about some of these buildings that you might not have. So
That'd be great.
maybe next week we can talk.
Okay.
And I would be very happy, if there's nothing else, to ask for the meeting to be adjourned.
Michelle?
Yeah, I echo Judy's praises. You did a really good job. The zoning can make your head spin. So I know trying to get all the numbers straight and what it means. Adam just mentioned that the height could be dependent on open space. Can you clarify that for us? And
Well,
are pops playing a role there, or?
no, there's no pops. Pops are not allowed anymore. In the
Just as well, because they were very poorly used and instituted and whatever. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, height factor zoning in general means that a development height is governed by the amount of open space provided on the zoning lot. And there's all sorts of formulas set forth in the zoning resolution that show you the ratios of what height can be depending on how much open space you provide. That's the difference between height factor versus contextual for, say, R6 zones, R7-1, R7-2, R8, and R9 zones. So we're not sure. I mean, we think we're going to look at this as a contextual with a stated height cap, and as we were advised to use off-the-shelf zoning. So that's the route we took for the mid-block, or the mid-block portions of this block. And yeah, height factor zoning would not really be appropriate.
So when you say open space, is that open space something that we can determine or we can ask for?
Well, it's the open space, it's the envelope that is used to form the project, and it's open space that has to be accessible to the residents of the building.
But not to the public?
Generally not. In some cases it could be.
So in our next meeting, do you think you can give us some examples of that?
I was just about to say, let me pull some examples of.
Yeah, that would be very helpful. The other thing is, in looking at all of this, are you taking into consideration the city of Yes? Do we have to deal with that in terms of this?
So you may remember, I guess 2 meetings ago when I presented potential zone types, I included, and here is the FAR as it currently stands, and here is the FAR under City of Yes, and here is the height limit under current regulations, and here is the height limit under City of Yes. There, no question that there are increases in City of Yes. It's hard to sort of project forward and say, well, if City of Yes passes, we would say R8A, but if City of Yes doesn't pass, we would say R8 regular. So I'm just assuming that whatever we would consider to be an acceptable zone level of current zones, City of Yes may be a little bit bigger.
So basically, we should just ask for what we want.
Yeah.
Which is a good idea.
Elizabeth is being a good co-chair and not even mentioning the evil ideas swirling around in my head about 15 and 18 FARs. So we'll set that aside.
Well, she won't be, if that's the case, she won't be the only one concerned.
Yes, we balance each other very well.
I think Adam has the idea, after listening to whomever all those many years, where some of us might fall on those proposals.
Judy.
Could probably predict.
Judy?
No, I thought I was unmuted. A question I forgot to ask. When we go up 60th Street or 61st Street or whatever, First Avenue, Second York Avenue, shouldn't we be inviting the building owners or whoever manages, if it's a huge building, management, shouldn't we tell them about this meeting and tell the owners that we're talking about potentially, for instance, Manhattan mini storage, you want to change part of their zoning for the building they own. You don't want to go all the way down the block. A lot of these people are members of our neighborhood association. He's one of them. I am sure that he would be very interested in hearing that how you want to rezone his property. I just think that it would be the right thing for us to do to invite the building owners to the meeting the next time we discuss this, and or any other pieces of property. If they don't want to come, that's fine, but at least we did our job.
Yeah. And I think we all also discussed that sort of once we have a sense of what we would like to propose, that is the right time to go out to the community and to the public and to the building owners.
I'm not sure that you might not, in the talking about what you want to propose, that you might not want to hear from them, and how much they would be against it, and if they're going to end up starting a lawsuit or hiring a lawyer. I mean, it seems to me sooner is better, is my attitude.
Okay.
But that's just my thought.
Yeah, it is a fair point.
Yeah. You make a decision and then you go.
All right, Michelle.
Yeah, I think we had that conversation, and I'm usually for, inclusivity and early notification and all that. But with something like this, the zoning, it would be more educational. You'd have to bring everybody up to speed to even understand what you were talking about. And when we come up with a plan, we will then be in the position to be very explanatory about it. And there won't be any ifs, ands, or buts. And at that time, we could even discuss alternatives. And I think that that's the right time to bring people in. Because when we're talking about something and we don't have a firm idea, excuse me, or rationale of what we want, to then have various opinions thrown at us, I don't think will be constructive in terms of coming to a final proposal. And I shouldn't even use the word final. It will just be an initial proposal. And that's when we go, and that proposal, which we can then explain with rationale and what each thing is, that could be argued by every member of the community. And as a matter of fact, we said at that time that would be when we would propose it when we would involve the community. Even I think before the board would take a vote on it, it would just be the proposal coming out of this committee. At that time, it gets presented to the community. That's when you get feedback. That's when you alter, and then maybe even get feedback again, and then present it for a final discussion at the board. But the terminology, it's too hard to follow. It's too difficult. And I think that the bulk of our meetings would be informative and answering questions about zoning and what this means and that means, rather than being able to move along and come to some kind of a initial presentation is what I'll call it. So yeah. I would not be in favor of bringing the public in at this moment, bearing in mind these are public meetings and they have an agenda. And if I were the owner of that building and I saw that zoning was being discussed on 61st Street, I might come to this meeting.
Yep.
you know, just because it's not a secret, it's all posted. But in terms of asking for input at this point, I think it would be counterproductive. Thanks.
Thank you. So that gets us to the topic for our next meeting. The topic for our next meeting would be to do this very visual with photographs look at the block from 60th to 61st Street, fronting First Avenue, extending west to the overpass of I guess it's the Koch Bridge, and then west of the overpass to the point that is Avenue Zone. So there's a little bit of space there. So that is going to be the topic for our next meeting. It is a single block. It has a lot on it, and so looking forward to having this discussion. And then future meetings, we would continue this same type of block by block discussion of looking at what is there, what is around it, and having a discussion over what is the appropriate zone. And with that, would anybody like to propose?
I've been unmuted. I just want to say, Elizabeth, I don't know if you're asking input from the, from the committee. I know you said you might want to move it to the 11th of June. I am not available then. I don't know who else is available, but if you want to just examine dates, since that's going to be, important to discuss, you might want to get some kind of a feeling about availability. I just wanted to say that.
I can skip going to the Philharmonic in Central Park since that is the posted date. But I just, I thought there might be a groundswell of us saying, no, we all want to go to the Philharmonic in Central Park.
Yeah. Can't do it on the 11th. At any rate, shall I make a motion to adjourn with that? Or I can't if I spoke, or what's the rule?
You absolutely can. So
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you all. Really appreciate your
Thank you
staying
very
in and
much.
dealing
Good
with this
job.
really complex stuff. Much appreciated.